Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment, of course, of Beards and Cars, and I teased this episode earlier this week in the comments section of one of the other videos because a lot of people, in particular with this update, the 1.39 patch that just arrived with, of course, Goodwood in particular, but also some new scapes, some kind of bug fixes that haven't exactly fixed the bugs, but they're a little better, and some new career mode events as well. But a lot of people have been feeling negative about that pack, and I'm not going to say you're wrong for feeling that way. However, I think there is an important discussion to be had about the way you go about criticizing something, because having a legitimate criticism is great. At the end of the day, my stance on this is that we are consumers. We have paid for Gran Turismo Sport, just like we paid for every other Gran Turismo game. And although you're not technically entitled to any specific piece of content within the game, you are entitled to have your money's worth. So if you feel that you're not having your money's worth from the experience, you can either do two things. You can stop playing, or you can formulate an argument to try and get your thoughts out there to improve things. And that's unfortunately where a lot of people miss the mark. They just get angry and then they put comments out there. And of course I do the same. Everyone does. For instance, of course, I was going to do an entire episode about the, frankly, dumbass comments that were said on GT Planet about my channel. And I went over and addressed those. And I decided to just be that person that I can sometimes be, giving no time or patience with anyone and treating them exactly how they treat me. And wouldn't you know it, they don't actually respond too well to being treated in the way that they treat others. But, although it's fun to do that, and it certainly was, it's not the way to change people's minds. Now, the reason why I did that is because I couldn't care less about changing the people's minds at GT Planet. I've known what they're like for years, and that's why I don't post that much. However, in this case, when you're talking about polyphony that you're aiming your arguments towards, you shouldn't really feel the same way, because at the end of the day, they have made us 7 games, plus prologues, demos, offshoots, betas, tourist trophies, PSPs. They are clearly in love with what they do. They love the fact that we love what they do. So don't treat polyphony like the enemy here, because that is not what they are. Now, I don't want to seem like this video is giving them excuses by any stretch, and I'd like to think that many of you know, from what I've said in the past, that I am very much so an objective reviewer of Gran Turismo. I do not side as a fanboy or as a hater. I will criticize Gran Turismo and I will support it for various things, just like I will with Forza and any other franchise. I am the first to accept its faults and the first to praise its greatness. And I have done so either way over and over again. However, these 4 points I think are worth considering at least, and I'm not asking you to agree with all of these or necessarily to fully believe all of them, but it's just 4 potential things to consider. And of course, as always, the time codes are in the description of every Beards and Cars episode if you want to jump around for future reference. But 2 of these are more set in stone, you could say. They're not absolute fact, which technically would be set in stone, but you know what I mean. They are more substantial. And the latter 2 that I'll get into are more my personal thoughts that could or could not be true. So first of all, to get to the 2 more substantial ones, the first one is that Kaz himself said on Twitter when announcing about Goodwood that he was giving the mods a break from making cars this month. Now, of course, that wasn't like some kind of official press release. It was more of just a passing statement, a little bit of humour in there you could consider. But at the end of the day, he's not wrong. That is what they're doing. They're giving those car makers a break. Now, this is a crucial point in the discussion where your background and experience will make a huge difference to where you stand on this issue. Because I'm coming toward this as someone who has put out 5,500 plus videos over the past 4 or 5 years on YouTube. So I know what it's like to be a creator who puts out content all the time. From that point of view, which is not the same point of view as everyone criticizing Gran Turismo, I can say, yes, sometimes you do need a break. Now, for me, I haven't taken a break from YouTube in all of that time because not only do I enjoy it so much, because that is not the issue, It's because of a personality type that I have. It's kind of OCD, but in terms of finding something that I enjoy, that I'm good at, and that is productive, and I just stick to it. That's just the kind of personality type that I have, and not everyone has that. Even if you enjoy something, you can still get tired out. And plenty of YouTubers have burned out in the past. So I can understand what he means, even if it's not like an official statement. Sometimes they may need a break, because although from our point of view, you see something like 5 or 6 cars being added to the game, and it doesn't seem like much. You think, really? Is that it? 5 or 6 cars? I could probably do that myself. Well, probably not, unless you actually have a history of coding and know what's involved in that kind of stuff of developing cars, getting the real sounds of the cars, getting the physics right, all that kind of stuff. Trust me, you really do not understand what is involved in making a vehicle in a game. Just like everything, people think that they are a wealth of knowledge until you've actually done it. Trust me, learn about any subject and you will quickly realize how little you knew about it before. That is exactly what happened to me when I became a mechanic. Before I went to college, I thought I knew a lot about cars until I went to college, and then you learn every day things that you had no idea about before. And it's like that with every single profession in the world, from modding to, creating these cars in Gran Turismo to doing whatever job you happen to do, or whatever you happen to be learning in school or in college. Because at the end of the day, if you already knew it, there would be no such thing as school or college. You would already know everything, and you don't. Nobody does. So that is a valid thing. And again, I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying that I understand what he means by that. Especially, and let's be brutally honest here, if you are creating a product which you are not charging any money for, as these updates are not charging anything from us, and yet every time you put out that product, you get a substantial amount of the people that you're giving that product to for free, whining and complaining and bitching about the cars that they don't have and the cars that they want and that they didn't want this track and that they don't like that car. How long do you think you would keep giving them those things? Or, more accurately, how long do you think you would even enjoy giving them these things? Now, of course, the overwhelming majority of the community does enjoy those updates and do enjoy those cars. But the fact remains that the negative people always have the loudest voice, which is unfortunate, but it's also a fact. So I get where he's coming from. The second thing is one which a number of comments from you guys actually clued me into that I was not aware of, and that's kind of the point. And this is the current situation in Japan. Now, I'm not going to claim to know all of the circumstances, and of course you could look into this yourself, but currently from what I've heard from some of you, is that Japan is going through a change of emperor, and there are subsequent traditions and holidays in effect because of that. Now, unfortunately, the vast majority of the mindsets of English-speaking countries, Britain and America in particular, but some others too potentially, will be, oh, good for them. They need a holiday, new emperor, who cares? Get on with making my game. It's a very insensitive view, and unfortunately it's one which many people still have, but that's also a fact. If that is their tradition, that's their tradition. Regardless of whether or not you agree with it, that is what is happening. So, for instance, you wouldn't expect Gran Turismo to, for instance, work on Christmas or to work on some other major holiday where people don't work. You wouldn't ask them to do that because you also wouldn't want to do it yourself. Or at least the majority of people wouldn't. So likewise, if this is this huge deal, which it is, then that is a valid thing to bear in mind. Once again, not an excuse. Just something for you to consider. And also, the more you know, the more you might be able to understand. The third and fourth thing are, as I said, more my personal thoughts, and these could absolutely be wrong. The first one is that this is actually not something new for Gran Turismo. And this is more an overarching discussion, not just of this month, but I'm referring to the updates in general. Because many of you guys will be saying in the comments, yeah, that's all well and good, but the updates have been getting smaller before the new Emperor came in, and for months we've had less cars. That's true. It's absolutely true, and that is where I agree with you. I'm speaking specifically to this month, why we've had the bigger gap, why there are no cars, why it seems that it's a smaller update. That in general, though, I do agree with your sentiments. The updates have been getting smaller, and it does feel maybe a little underwhelming sometimes. However, What I want to say about that is, A, you can't change the past, so there's no point in complaining about it, but at the same time, the precedent was set in Gran Turismo 6 as well. Because for those of you who, like myself, played it from day one, many of you even followed this channel from day one through Gran Turismo 6's development, as we reviewed cars as they were added to the game, the Vision GTs, the Zytek, the Nismo, various others too, the updates got thinner. That's exactly what happened in Gran Turismo 6, and what did that indicate? That brings me to my fourth point. The reason why Gran Turismo 6 development started to slow down is because of Gran Turismo Sport. And that is the potential silver lining to this entire discussion. Because my fourth thing for you to bear in mind is that when that happened in Gran Turismo 6, it was because more of the Polyphony team, which incidentally is a significantly smaller team than Turn 10 has at Forza, what happened was they were turning their attention to the next game. Now, I have my thoughts on that, and I've discussed that before. I do think that people should focus on what they're doing now instead of constantly trying to go to the next thing. It's cool to plan ahead, but planning ahead and working two jobs at once when you can't do either of them to the fullest, that's not a smart business move, and far too many people try to do that. And it's a fine balance, of course, but this could mean that they are working more on Gran Turismo 7. Now, I have no doubt that they're already working on some things for Gran Turismo 7, and I've mentioned before that a number of things will probably be carried over from GT Sport into GT7. The physics maybe, doubtless the livery editor, the graphics for the most part probably, many of the sounds, and of course many of the vehicles. However, that is the potential silver lining, because if GT Sport is beginning to slow down, that's actually a pretty good sign for Gran Turismo 7, because it could mean that they are shifting their focus ever so slowly and surely into that next game, potentially, as we discussed in another episode of this series, being on the PS5. So of course, being on a whole new console, there's going to be major changes that they have to make. Once again, not an excuse, just something for you to consider. And once again, I'm not the kind of person who will fall completely on either side of this. I think there are very valid points to be made, both on the positive and the negative, on the patient and the impatient side. Because although I don't fully agree with the way the impatient people put their thoughts out there, I get where you're coming from. And sometimes that anger and that kind of snarky comment that is made comes from that place of feeling let down or feeling that the game developers don't have as much interest anymore in something that you still love. I know those feelings, trust me, which is why I'm saying that I don't completely condemn those people. I just think that it's a matter of trying to explain to those people that, look, I know the way you feel. I know that you're disappointed, and to some degree so am I. But you've got to know how to fight your battles. You don't go into a court of law and slap the judge across the face, because it's not going to accomplish anything. You go in, you stay calm, you present your case, and then maybe something will get done. So putting your thoughts out there in this crazy, insulting, over-the-top way, it just turns people off. If you really think that Polyphony is going to listen to that, then you clearly have no idea how things work, because they won't. It will make them less likely to do something. And unless you have some kind of crazy, overwhelming majority of negativity, which is not the case with Gran Turismo Sport, even though many people feel that it is, again, because of the vocal nature of those negative comments, the vast majority of people do still like the game. And many people love the game. So that is nowhere near happening. It's not going to happen. You would need like 80%, 90% negativity for Polyphony to think, oh, we've got to do something. It's nowhere near that. It's probably more like 10%, if that. And it feels like more. Trust me, I know. But when you actually think about the numbers of the millions of people playing it, it's really not. It's probably 10% at best, probably less. So overall, those are my thoughts. Just 4 things to keep in mind. Kaz giving the guys a break, which is a very valid thing, although it may not sound like it. The Japanese holidays currently, that's an extremely valid one that you should consider. The GT6 precedent of slowing down with the updates, and also tying into the 4th thing of potentially meaning that Gran Turismo 7 is beginning development in a more substantial way, maybe than it already was. Or maybe even something else, the FIA stuff, a Tourist Trophy 2, let's hope, but more likely than anything I would say Gran Turismo 7. Plus, at the end of the day, you've got to remember as well that Kaz did not promise us 1,200 cars. It was never claimed that Gran Turismo Sport was going to be as big as GT6. In fact, the original claim, I believe, was that it would end up with around 500 cars. And although we're certainly not at 500 yet, it's not necessarily a bad idea to start making the updates smaller. Because if you think about it, Polyphony is kind of notorious for not meeting the deadlines that fans would expect the games to come out on. It's often much later than you'd expect. However, if they were to put out 10 cars every month, and then get to the 500 cars, and then nothing, the game would die. People would think, oh, there's no more updates? Well, then I'm not playing it anymore. Again, not everyone, but many people do feel that way. I know that many of you come on like once a month just to check out the new stuff, and then you start playing other games again. Nothing wrong with that, I understand it, and that's probably the way I would be if I weren't making videos for it all the time. But the fact remains that if they were to just dump all of those cars in the size of update that we used to have, like 10 cars, 12 cars, that kind of stuff, then suddenly dropping from that to none at all once we reach 500 would be extremely jarring, whereas gradually reducing the size of the packs over time, especially as we get closer and closer to Gran Turismo 7, and in particular when something like a teaser or a trailer or art for Gran Turismo 7 is released, it makes it much more of an eventual, gradual transition between the two games. And although that may not seem as fun as having loads of cars all at once, trust me, having a massive gap in game development between the two would be extremely jarring, and it would put many people completely off, whereas having this trickle down, smaller and smaller, at least keeps it going for longer. I'm not saying that I think that's the best idea you could possibly do, but it's at least, or appears at least, to be what they could be trying to do. Again, I'm not saying any of that is absolute fact. Again, it's just something to consider. So overall, of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Doubtless there'll be a ton of thoughts either way. So basically, just try and keep it civil. Nothing wrong with an argument. Just word it in the right way and get your thoughts out there in an intelligent way. Don't just into the void. So overall, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, slap yours down below as well, and we'll see how things go. Of course, if these updates continue in this zero cars kind of way, then we can revisit the discussion. But I think in this month in particular, are more relevant than they would have been before. So overall, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, I'll see you guys next week, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.